What do you think? Is it better to not violate the Torah's prohibitions because Hashem commanded us not to do them? Or because we're not even tempted to violate them? I like these kinds of questions because it doesn't matter what you think, you're correct. It depends. The Rambam, in his introduction to the Mishnayot of Pirkei Avot, explains that there are two kinds of prohibitions in the Torah. There's what's called mitzvot shim'iyot, prohibitions that if they weren't written in the Torah, we wouldn't know that they're problematic. These prohibitions we have to not violate only because Hashem told us not to do it. On the other hand, there are mitzvot sichliyot, prohibitions that are obvious, they're very moral. Do not murder, do not steal. These we would know from ourselves. So even though they're written in the Torah, the ideal is to reach a stage where we're not even tempted to violate these prohibitions. But there's still a problem, because if we're observing or not violating the mitzvot sichliyot, the obvious prohibitions, only because it's moral, only because we think we're not tempted, what happens if our morality change? Maybe Bnei Ras, in a generation or two, they might change their mind. I think the answer to this is in this week's Parashat. In this week's Parashat Behar, we find 3 mitzvot that it says in them, the verse, V'yaretem Elokecha. One is not to trick our fellow in business. The second is not to lend money to a fellow Jew with interest. And the third is to not enslave a Jewish slave too harshly. In all these mitzvot, the pasuk adds V'yaretem Elokecha. You should fear your God. This is a very unique thing. We don't find it too often. Why is it written here? I think the answer is that these mitzvot, the Rambam says, are obvious mitzvot. Who would want to trick his friend in business? Who would want to enslave a fellow Jew too harshly? The Torah comes and says, right, you have to keep these mitzvot because you shouldn't even be tempted to do them. But with it, don't forget the V'yaretem Elokecha. Don't forget to fear your God. Have this balance between the morality, the human morality, and the fear of God that would keep us in check. Shabbat Shalom.